Hello everyone, this is Mini Ninja speaking. Welcome to the Christmas episode that almost didn't happen, for reasons I'll explain later. But for this particular episode, we're going to be doing a double review of what's essentially the same figure with some tweaks to it. Namely being the Beast Deities Sobek figure. Now, Beast Deities, for those that aren't familiar, is basically a rebranded version of the Kong Studios line of toys, after they had their assorted legal troubles. So, in order to get around it, everything is now shipped in assorted little packages, being the base body, which you can see here is a very plain clamshell, with all the accessories being in this lovely Ziploc bag, and with the more identifiable features of the characters being in separate quote-unquote bookmark boxes, as well as pen holder boxes, for the face sculpts and the actual hair pieces themselves. So, as we take a look at the quick height, we're starting with what's in the base packaging here, which is this lovely pink alligator head here. Figure stands at just a little under 6 inches tall. And as we do the articulation test with the default parts on here, you can see for what is a 3.0 style figure, everything is, for the most part, handled quite well, frankly speaking. No real issues I find on this toy, at least from the upper body analysis. Next point works just fine. The butterfly joints are perfectly stable. Double jointed elbows, perfect good. Wrist joints are feeling alright, they're nice and tight on there. The upper torso, kind of the ability to bend back and forth, is a bit limited due to the sculpt of the skirt pit, or the shirt part that is up there. But it is present, and if it weren't there, it would be able to move just fine. Skirt doesn't affect the hip articulation at all, surprisingly enough. It's a very soft plastic they use on there, so you can bend to the sides and back and forth just fine. Double knee joints on this case, everything's beautiful. Only thing I will say, the toe joints are a bit soft, a bit less tight than they should be. Mind you, as long as you're honestly not trying to balance on the toes themselves, you should be fine. In terms of a base body, I'd say, frankly, we're doing alright for ourselves here. Not that there are too many real 3.0 figures to really compare to, when I really think about it. Now, moving on to the accessories, this is all the stuff that was in the default Ziploc bag, just to remind you. You can see, actually, a rather generous amount of hands, frankly speaking, to go with that. Both gloved and ungloved, and while they're mostly the same sculpt, you can kind of see that on the gloved hands, there is a little bit of change in terms of detailing. As you can see, there's some fabric markings going on there to indicate that, yes, it is a different thing, and it's not just a straight-up copy of the other hands. Not counting these paw hands here, which are the exact same thing you see in all other Beast Deities releases up to that point of this particular video coming out. Now, in terms of getting them to fit on the pegs there, I'll be frank, at least on mine, I was having a little less than fun getting that on there. They're a very snug fit, I find. So what I would probably suggest if you were trying to do this with your own copy, assuming you were able to pick it up while this particular toy was still available, is that you definitely want to heat up the hands themselves with a nice, I would say, soak them in some hot water in there first, just to get them on there. And after that, they'll pop on just fine and stay on there, but it's a bit of a pain without. Now, for the quote-unquote bookmarks and pen holder, as you can see, we have a nice stylish set of 4 face plates, as well as a hair pit, which the actual hairpiece itself can hold bangs for both a Super Saiyan 1 and Super Saiyan 2 look. Now, how you get these on there, as you can see, they, much like every other Beast Deities release up to the point, are pretty much just a simple job of clipping onto the head. And just for proof of reference, here's what the alternate bangs look like on there, and they fit on there just fine. Now, getting the faceplates in there, it's not a perfect fit, I will say, at least not on my copy. Some of them do fit on there like they're supposed to, some of them are requiring a little more effort to stretch the faces around. But with a little work, you can get them on there. Now, in order to get the hair on there, you want to heat that up in the hot water as well, I would say, same as the hands. Once you do get on there, frankly beautiful, speaking. Doesn't affect the articulation at all, stays on there quite snug, and he becomes a rather stylish, dapper fellow once you get everything on there. Faceplates themselves are pretty standard. Most of them are honestly covered with the mask there, but you do get that one more smiling face on there, and even with the faceplates on there, doesn't affect how the bangs fit on there at all. This was clearly well designed with the mask in mind. In terms of the main body overall here, as well as the head sculpt that's included on this particular package, my issues with it are generally very minor. Maybe a little bit of issues with certain articulation points, namely the toes are definitely a bit problematic, and the upper torso being limited because of the overall shirt thing, but otherwise they're not doing so bad so far. Now, will this hold up on this release? Who knows? Because we're going to be looking at oddly enough, Beast Deities Sobek. Yet again. Now, this might look confusing, because the packaging you see in there is virtually identical to the main one, except for a sticker on the bottom there. One being 30, the other one being 32. Because they reused the packaging for the base body. The hair and the faces are almost virtually identical, but once you get to the correct one open, you can see that the look on this one is actually going to be based on the full-powered rosé look that is used later in the superhero appearances. Now, once again, very slim clamshell, and the accessories are inside the Ziploc bag of quality that we have here, with the only real key difference I see being that the gator head, instead of being pink, is now black. What is the real difference aside from that? Nothing. The sculpts are literally quite the same. They just cast it in a different material. I could just to have something to add to the collection there. Now, in terms of the overall height, it's going to be roughly about the same 6 inches tall. And for the main body, there are a few changes this time around. Namely, the upper torso is entirely different there. And while it may seem like it uses some bits of the same base sculpt, I believe, as the Super Saiyan 5 figure, basically the AF base one, as far as I can tell, this is mostly a unique sculpt they have on there. And is generally mostly pretty functional. I'd say maybe the only issue I might have is that the butterfly joints were a bit stiff, I find, on mine, but overall still functional. Upper torso articulation works just fine. No shirt to interfere with this time, so up and back articulation on torso, perfectly alright. Skirt, once again, made out of a soft material, so it doesn't mess with the hip articulation at all, including kicking back and forth. Everything is perfectly functional. Now, in terms of the legs themselves, I believe they're roughly the same as the original sculpt we just looked at, so there are no real new issues on there. But unfortunately, that also kind of means that they have the same issues as before, namely, the toes. The toes are not particularly strong. Oh, the only other thing I will add on there is on the hip bit. You'll notice that there is now a brown tail on there. Now, how there's a brown tail on something that has bright orange hair, damned if I know. Moving on to the accessories for the second set, I will correct what I said earlier, where I was saying that it was basically the same in terms of the contents, because technically that is inaccurate. As you can see, there is no gloved set of hands this time around, as it's just basically plain hands throughout both. Now, the actual selection of hands, I believe, are roughly the same poses. Obviously, you got your closed fists, more open palmed ones, karate chop ones, and the same general pointing hands, and recolored animal hands for that matter, but they are unique enough still. Now, we take a look at the faceplates here. Honestly, decent enough selection of faceplates and expressions on there. A more neutral one, this little smirk. There's actually going to be a pained expression in a second. And the last one, which is also a yelling face, also has an interesting little flaming mask effect, which is actually translucent. It is quite nice to look at. And technically, all these parts are mixable, I should say, because the masks themselves can be pulled off and swapped between these pieces. And with that, will be the last positive thing I have to say about this toy, as we get to the hair. Now, you'll forgive me if I kind of go on a preamble here, but I kind of have to. The large hair pieces that Beast Deities tends to do for their figures almost seem to uniformly have the same set of flaws. One, because of the way they segmented it, the pieces will hold together, but actually getting them to pose and hold the poses is a bit of a pain. They tend to kind of droop back down to a more neutral position because the joints just aren't that tight between one hair piece to the next. In this case, it also has a bad paint finish or overall finish on the hair for mine. 2. Getting it on the figure is an absolute pain. Now, I will give you that getting it here on Sobek, aka Goku Black, was a lot easier than the original and her release, but not by much. And 3. The hair bits are super heavy. So, with the weak joints that they have on the toes and the ankle joints, yeah, you're going to need a stand almost guaranteed in order to get this figure to stand up correctly. It's not going to do it on its own. Now that we finally have our figure kind of attached properly, everything is looking fine and dandy, except for what I will say for the Sobek figure set is a hidden fourth flaw. DLC in the form of an accessory pack. Because as it turns out, they did make the normal energy blade as well as large scythe this character is associated with, but those are all sold separately. Kind of falling in line with what official figures did, but these particular third-party toys are not cheap, so very much not a fan of the practice. What I do appreciate, though, is you guys all joining me on what is either a Christmas Eve or Christmas Day stint, whenever this gets uploaded, to watch something that almost didn't happen because all this footage almost got lost off of a memory stick that went corrupt. So, thank you very much for joining me on the video that almost didn't happen. We'll hopefully be catching each other before the New Year's, but in the meanwhile, Merry Christmas, and take care.